Welcome everyone to Rewind Recap Relive, where legends and rising stars meet. I'm your host Jonah, and we're here at our Halloween edition of the show, October 15th. 16 days to Halloween. We'll call it halfway there. And you're about to witness something unlike anything we've ever put out here on the channel. You're going to witness what happens when the fearless leader of Freakshow Wrestling, the warlord of weird, Sinn Bodhi, crosses paths with our two other guests, if you want to call them that. I'd call them creatures of the night, Duke Cornell and the Carver. But first, let's get into who we got on next week's giveaway, and the winner of this week's giveaway for that Sinn Bodhi t-shirt. So who is it? Who's going to be a cinnamon muffin this Halloween? Who's going to rep that fearless leader of Freakshow Wrestling, the warlord of weird, Sinn Bodhi's t-shirt? Well, the winner is Colin Wright. Congratulations, you're the winner. Send us your details, comment it down below. If you don't want people to know your size, I understand. You could send us an email, and we'll get that shirt right out to you. Now, for those brave souls able to venture past Sinn, the Carver, and Duke Cornell, we've got a treat for you next week in Rising Star, the young gun Chandler Hopkins coming on with WWF wrestling legend Sam Houston. And you have the chance to win a Sam Houston signed 8x10 by simply commenting hashtag R3 giveaway down below in this video. That's going to be hashtag R3 giveaway down below in the full Carver, Sinn Bodhi, and Duke Cornell interview, and you will be entered to win that merch. Good luck. Alright, we're literally seconds away, and I've warned you all week, do not watch this interview alone. You're going to want to share this one around for sure. Watch it with some friends. We've got a film crew out there in Parts Unknown for Carver, Duke, reporting from Parts Unknown, and Sinn on his ranch. I'm in the studio. What a crew. And I think you're really going to enjoy this one, so please, all you have to do is subscribe to the channel for more content. Keep your eyes out for that Chandler Hopkins, Sam Houston interview next week. Enter the giveaway, comment hashtag R3 giveaway down below for that Sam Houston signed 8x10, and enjoy this interview. It's safe to say that we're bringing you a very unique episode of Rewind Recap Relive today. Our first guest is shrouded in mystery. Only one thing is absolutely certain, that is he likes to inflict pain on his opponents. Please welcome the Carver along with his interpreter, Duke Cornell. Our next guest I'd like to introduce is a veteran in the wrestling industry. He is the puppet master of the, quote, most funnest, most violently violent spectacle in the galaxy, Freakshow Wrestling. Please welcome the warlord of weird, Sinn Bodhi.
Hello, Earthlings.
And so the first question is going to be really straightforward for both of you, and I just want to know what's led you down the road of wrestling. And Sinn, if you can go first and tell us a little bit about the early parts of your journey.
Sure. So growing up in a small town just outside of Toronto, Ontario, Canada, I grew up in this little, like a little farmhouse, a little ranch house.
Yeah.
And we didn't have internet because I'm super old. We didn't even have cable. We had just a couple local channels. So throughout the fuzzy channels, and you have to dial in, I would see WWF Saturday morning, like Maple Leaf Wrestling with Jack Tunney and, all the WWF characters.
Yeah.
And I was an artsy fartsy little shy introverted kid. So my face was always in comic books. And I actually, I learned how to draw pretty good. And I was just sort of always in my own head. I was a very quiet little kid. And it wasn't like I could go across the street and play with neighbors because I was in this little country house in the middle of nowhere. And so, maybe once a week I would get to get the note to get on this bus to go to this friend's house for an afternoon little play day. And then I'd get carted home afterwards. My parents always had multi jobs and whatever. So, I spent a lot of time stuck in front of a TV or with my face in a comic book.
Right.
And pro wrestling was the live version of a comic book to me. It was larger than life, superheroes and supervillains and so forth. And being such a shy little kid, coupled with pretty, I don't know what's the right word, extravagant imagination. So that just set me down all those sort of dreaming paths. And I never imagined that my perception was, you have to be 7 feet tall just to be a referee. So I kind of thought it just wasn't going to be in the cards. My mom was tall and my mom is tall and my dad is tall, but I didn't think I would be that tall. So, right. I mean, I come in at about 6'1" and change. We'll call it a sports entertainment 6'2". But so my brain just always was racing and spinning and thinking of all these ideas, and I would draw comic books and draw wrestlers and stuff. And then fast forward as the years went on, just the opportunity arose, and I thought, I think I could do this, and especially Christian. So I grew up with Edge and Christian, and
Nice.
He's about my height, maybe a hair taller, but he's a lot scrawnier than I am. Like I'm about 240 pounds. He is not. And that time growing up, like, the smallest guys we ever saw, and not a lot of tape on, because again, we didn't have the internet. We saw like Rock and Roll Express and Thunder Lager and guys who we thought were still bigger than they were. I mean, they're all big guys, like for real. Like people think Rock and Roll Express is small. They're big dudes. Just maybe by yesteryear's landscape, they were smaller guys. Right. So I just thought you had to be a super heavyweight, which we were not. Like we were end of high school, we kind of spurted up, and we were little runty guys in high school, but then we kind of just spurted. And I went into college, and Christian did not. And I didn't realize that there was cruiserweight wrestling or fast-paced wrestling. I just saw you have to be a monster. So really, I credit to, I probably wouldn't have gone to wrestling school if Christian didn't go first and think, well, man, that little scrawny pipsqueak, he could do it, then I'm going to do it. And that's kind of how that went. Like Edge, he kind of shot up. Like we were all little runty kids, and then all of a sudden, just overnight, he went from 5-something to 6'4" or 6'5".
Yeah, just pretty big, definitely.
Yeah, he's about 6'5". He's a big boy. A lot of people don't realize just how big some of these wrestlers are. Like they always freak out when they meet Jake the Snake for the first time. I mean, he's easy 6'6", barefoot.
I absolutely agree with that. One time when I met him, I couldn't believe it. He towered over me.
Absolutely. And again, me and Edge and Christian, Adam and Jay, we watched as little kids growing up. We literally kind of, our first dose of wrestling psychology was us taking those little rubber LJNs, which you can see me nerding out in the back. Like I have those little toys in the back.
Yeah.
Those things are probably twice as old as you are. And so we would write cards, and we wouldn't be thinking in wrestling terms, but we would like write cards for these guys, and we would put over guys that we wouldn't maybe necessarily enjoy in real life, but maybe they just had a cooler pose in the toy, so they'd get the push and so forth. Like, how can Jake the Snake DDT anybody posed like this?
Exactly.
So Jake always got jobbed for that stuff, but we would, we would play with those toys. And again, when I would get the note to get on the right bus to go to the right friend's house for an evening, and we'll watch Saturday Night's Main Event and try to stay up and keep our little kid eyes open long enough to watch, because it would air at like 11:30 p.m. It would sort of take place. It would sort of it would job out Saturday Night Live once a month, and we would see it. And I remember literally watching and seeing Jake the Snake DDT Ricky Steamboat on the concrete. I remember Edge and Christian going, "Oh my God, Ricky Steamboat! Oh no, blow Ricky!" And I just remember thinking, okay, I like Ricky Steamboat just fine, but I'd rather be that dude looming over Steamboat, sneering, than Ricky Steamboat twitching on the concrete. Yeah. So it just was a silly, slow, weird, introverted path to being a creative lunatic, I guess. And I'll cap off this story by just saying I was this really shy little kid, and not unlike somebody quitting smoking cold turkey. I was so shy and so trepidatious, and I just decided that's not going to do me any good. I literally put that down cold turkey. I just thought, I'm not going to be shy. I'm not going to be embarrassed of myself. I'm not going to be scared. That's no way to live. And if people like it, great. If they don't like it,
right. That's really inspiring, because I know so many people who would love to be able to have that ability, you know what I mean, to put that down. And maybe everyone does, right, somewhere deep inside, but it's great that you were able to do that. It really is.
Well, I can tell you this, what I tell a lot of wrestling students is when they say, I'm so nervous to go out there in front of people and wear some silly costume and just being in front of humans. Humans do not like being in front of other humans.
Yeah.
It is people's number one fear, public speaking. Mm-hmm. People's number two fear is dying. So think about that. So and playing the odds. It's not every single person. It's painting with a wide brush, not an all-encompassing brush. But for the most part, you're telling me that people are more scared of speaking in front of other earthlings, who are probably just as scared as they are, as opposed to croaking. How does that make any sense? It's amazing. The things that we have control over versus the things we do not have control over. I'd say put as much on your side of that fence as possible. You can't control there's a runaway bus and you're going to get, froggered by a runaway bus, or if cancer's going to get you, or this going to get you, or that's going to get you, whatever. A frozen piece of turd flying out of an airplane is going to land on you, whatever. It's out of your hands. But I think your own fears and your own trepidation, I think you can compartmentalize that. And not like a robot. We're not Data or Spock or anything like that. We, of course, have our emotions that run amok. But if we can get just the slightest grip on our emotions, our butterflies, we put our butterflies in the gas tank, they make awesome fuel. If we don't put the cap on tight, the butterflies spill out and we burn ourselves alive. That's when we make our own stupid mistakes. And like if somebody was to see a snake, and they go, oh my God, a snake, and they just stand there and scream like an idiot and just twitch and make loud noises, maybe the snake's gonna be like, what the hell is this loud, stupid thing? I'm gonna fight it. So they're not doing themselves any favor by, instead of going, oh, there's a snake, it's scary, I'm going to step back, I'm going to use my logic and say, I better just step back, I'm going to get out of the snake's, distance, and so forth, so forth. So their fear is their undoing. I think that is.
It is. It's really good advice. I think it is.
It's flaw by putting that sort of trepidation versus just, I don't know what's the right word, like freezing fear. Like, you can't do anything to protect yourself when you're like this. The jazz hands never saved any lives. Oh, here comes a big truck. Oh no, a big truck. Well, F your jazz hands, just get out of the freaking way.
Oh, you're right. Jazz hands definitely never saved any lives. So Duke, I'm going to hand it over to you now. If you could please tell us what caused the Carver to come out of these shadows that he's been lurking in, I'm assuming before wrestling, and journey down that path.
When it comes to how he came out of the shadows, as you so gingerly put it, when we were growing up, that was the only thing that him and I ever had in common. Our father chose two very different paths for us. I was to follow in his footsteps, be a man of the scripture. And when Carver was old enough to walk, Dad handed him a shovel and told him how to dig holes. Because I was supposed to give the last rites and he was supposed to give them the last place to rest. Finally, we had the opportunities on Saturdays where we could actually sit and see each other. We were very limited in our communications, and that was our chance where we could actually be brothers, where we could have that time and we would spend it watching wrestling. There was a little bit of other things that kids would do, play a little ball, catch, go play tag, but that was when Dad was away. That was when we could actually have our interaction. So finally, the opportunity presented itself where we could actually have what we wanted. We didn't have to take these paths that our father presented for us, and we picked this because this is where everything was strong. This is what we knew each other through.
Definitely taking the world by storm. And Sinn, growing up with Edge and Christian, like you mentioned, such creative brains, and yourself, of course, I'd love to hear about some early gimmicks or character ideas that you had. Do you remember any that you ever played around with before getting into wrestling that maybe never made it to the spotlight?
Sure. One of our silly high school names, I actually gave Edge. So his first actual wrestling name was Adam Impact.
Adam Impact? Okay.
Adam Impact. I'm like, that's terrible. I was literally at Monarch Park for his very first match on Canada Day once upon a time in the 90s. I can tell you when exactly it was, but I was there and I remember watching him getting just crunched by some big dude and just worried for my buddy, I'm as close to him as my own flesh and blood brother, he is my brother. I would take a bullet for him. And there's a half a handful of humans I could really say that about on the planet. He's definitely one of them. And so I just remember thinking, that's just a terrible name. He's so creative and so talented. And I don't remember how exactly I came up with it, but I'm like, what about Sexton Hardcastle? So that's what he ended up wrestling with until he got signed and they turned him into Edge. Well, that was him that I thought of. So many silly, stupid names.
Right.
Me and Christian, we would stay up and play like Mike Tyson's Punch Out and the Buster Douglas game. I can't remember what it was called, just archaic video games back in the day at stage when the wheels were still square and so forth. Yeah. And we had all sorts of ridiculous, stupid names. I think I had one character. I was Zulu Candy for a minute. There was all sorts of ridiculous things. We had all sorts.
Oh, that's great. What was the first one that you did think of? Was Sinn? Because I know when you were with TNA early on, you were Sinn, right? Not Sinn Bodhi, just Sinn.
Yes. Yeah, that was my first actual wrestling name. So again, being this creative dude, whatever, so I'm told. Ron Hutchinson was my first trainer, my original trainer, and he would sort of tell us when you first start, you usually start as a babyface. Right. So an experienced heel can lead you, just because it's easier for a heel to sort of lead that dance, because, you know, like, I don't know if you know anything about chess, but like a pawn is the babyface. Pawn just takes one step at a time forward.
Okay.
That fights the good fight. The heel is like the queen. The queen can zip and zag up and down the board, right across the board, as far as they want, whatever. They dictate the pace. So good guys go forward, heels move backward. Heels can move all the way around. And he explained it to us as such, so that the heel would, you know, lead a new, green, nervous babyface. Yeah. And then all of a sudden he says, hey, we're totally short on heels. You look scary. You're not going to start as a heel. So I was kind of tripped out.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I was kind of tripped out because we went totally against what he had been teaching us from day one. So again, I had to sort of compartmentalize that fear and just go, okay, all right, this is what I need to do. Fear isn't going to do me any favors. He told me, all right, you're gonna throw you in there next week. Think of a name. So on Creative Overdrive, I'm thinking I can think of a million names better. I've thought of a million names better since then and whatever. But my first and only thought was Sinn, because I just thought, well, and again, you know, like the landscape was looked at a little bit different back then than it is now, but still looking at it very much like modern day. I just thought, well, what's the one thing that ties us all together? You know, gay, straight, black, white, green, blue, you know, left, right, religious, agnostic, atheist, whatever. Sinn is the one thing that binds us all together. So I picked a really evil thing for the most altruistic of reasons.
Really great, really.
To elongate it, just so people are like, what was that? Because it's like a one-syllable word.
Yeah.
So Hutchinson came up with, well, let's put original Sinn in front of it. So I was original Sinn. Oh,
nice.
Just to spoon feed what Sinn is, you know.
Yeah. Who thought of that, did you say?
Ron Hutchinson. He also trained with Christian. Like I trained with Trish Stratus and Gail Kim and a bunch of different people, but we all came up under Ron Hutchinson.
Great. Okay. That was really good. I love that.
I was basically original Sinn for a few years. I tried little one-off names, like a name here or there for a night or two.
Yeah.
I was Dr. Nick Sinful for one night. To this day, my little brother calls me Dr. Nick. He just won't let it go.
That one stuck with him. That's cool.
Stuck with him. The first time I wrestled for Scott D'Amore, which is a BCW in Windsor. And at that time, you know, Hutchinson was doing a very old school thing where, like, if you work for him, you couldn't work anywhere else. He's changed his mind over that many years ago. But at that stage of the game, that's where his headspace was at. So I said, okay, Sinn will not work for Scott D'Amore. So I went and worked for Scott D'Amore as Lucifer Love. So there's that name. And there's a few little silly one-off names, but really it was just original Sinn until even at OVW, when I got hired, I was still like hired by WWE. I was original Sinn. And then as I went to FCW in Florida, I just said to Dr. Tom, hey, I get that I look outrageous. The name is a little bit cartoony. What if I was to lose the original and use Sinn as more of like a handle, like a biker handle or a prison handle or something? Nickname,
exactly, yeah.
And just give myself a last name. So, and again, like the same rationale for me thinking about Sinn was Bodhi was a character played by Patrick Swayze in Point Break, which I know that's probably before your time.
No, I saw, sadly, I saw the remake, but I also saw the original too.
Yeah, so I think the remake was really just kind of a glorified extreme sports video.
Yeah, it was.
But the original was phenomenal, and just the story really spoke to me. Like Patrick Swayze played. Well, you don't even know his character's name. They just called him the Bodhisattva, and they called him Bodhi for short. And he was this anarchistic, peace-loving anarchist that wanted to, he just wanted to rob banks and didn't want to hurt anybody. He just didn't want to be a slave. He didn't want to be a zombie in an iron coffin driving on the freeways with the rest of the sheep. And I totally was enamored by him. Like, I don't want to be a sheep, And
totally.
But I liked that he was like a polite anarchist. Mm-hmm. I kind of refer to myself like that. I think that really spoke to me. So hence Sinn Bodhi.
fantastic. It's great how you resonated with that. You're really one with that character. Absolutely.
Yeah, it really spoke to me. And like Bodhisattva, where they cropped it into Bodhi. Bodhisattva is a Buddhist term. It means without fear, greed, or delusion.
Okay.
And I just thought that was super cool and super spiritual.
A lot of meaning behind it. I think that adds, well, meaning to the character itself, but it connects you on a personal level.
Well, really speaking about character too, like you don't want to just be like, hey, I'm going to be a astronaut or vampire, whatever. Right. You really have to find stuff that is, you know, interesting to you, that you know about, that you can sort of attach yourself and emotionally to and everything.
Speaking of that, I'd love to hear, Duke, where are the origins of the Carver from? I really want to hear about that. How did it manifest?
He was, you okay with me saying this one, brother? We found him in an alley. He was very much the dumpster baby that everyone makes that sick joke about. Father took him in because it looked good in the church. It looked good for something for a man of God to do. And our mother Lilith was the one that was to take care of him, but he wouldn't permit for a name. He actually made sure that he had a bag over his head because he saw him as a blight of God, and he was not actually allowed to be seen by the church, just known that he was adopted. So from there, it was hard to keep track on brother all the times. When we'd go off to the church, he would be left to his own devices. We'd be gone for hours, and we'd come back, and there'd be animal pelts. There would be things just dead in the yard. We wouldn't know why. And Carver, he didn't, and still doesn't, know very good English, so he couldn't communicate that he had done it. So Dad was convinced that he was just a product of the devil himself, and wouldn't work with him, wouldn't teach him, wouldn't even name the boy. Carver came later after we found out it was him that was doing all of this. So it was just an affectionate name that I gave to him. And then Mother Lilith, she tried. She tried to connect with the boy as much as she could, but Father wouldn't permit for so much.
That's something that's interesting. You some affectionate name that you gave him there. As he is the Carver, what does he use to communicate with no words? His actions?
Actions are the best advice that he has. I also I've spent as much time with him as I can, so I can navigate the waters. I can't necessarily control anything as far as what he's trying to say to me and direct any kind of conversation, but I can almost aim it to where we can understand each other. There's not a lot of deep conversations. He was robbed of a lot.
Yeah. And
he wasn't given quite the gifts that I was. So I've been taking to trying to understand him as opposed to making him understand me. And it's mostly through just actions that we can actually communicate.
Right. And Sinn earlier spoke about the trepidation and the intimidation factor when first stepping into that ring and kind of how he overcame it. Carver, what does he think of the crowd? Was he ever intimidated or more so unaffected?
Crowds never seem to faze him too much. I think it's because he knows should it become a problem, he can fix it himself. So it's never been something that really keeps him at bay. It's something to where people should be more aware of him than he is of them.
Right. I can't imagine much keeps him at bay. Sinn, back to you. So you've spent time in TNA, right? In the early days of Sinn, as we mentioned. And somebody who we had on the show here, similar brain, I think was Raven to you. And I'd love to know, with those two kind of mad scientist, creative brains, some may say, how did you enjoy your work that you did with Raven there?
So I was always respectful of Raven's skills. I knew he was a very clever wrestler. I think at that point, we didn't get along so great because I think I was just the young, hungry guy just trying to, make everybody happy. And he was kind of grumpy. We've talked about it years later, and we're buddies to this day. And he was cool enough and intelligent enough and manly enough just to sort of say like, hey, even though I was a top guy there, I was still not in the greatest headspace. So sorry if I was ever shitty to you or anybody else there, which I thought that just to me really spoke to his character. So I have nothing but respect for Raven. And I think he is one of the most brilliant guys in this business. And I bugged him before about, running shows, and he would just sort of say like, I love this business enough and I know what kind of a headache that's going to be that I don't want to do that.
Right.
Run shows, like you were asking me before we went on air about Freakshow Wrestling, and not to jump the gun and talk about that by any means, but just put on a show for wrestlers that have not done that yet. That's a whole other creature, a whole other part of this business that you do not appreciate until you have run a show. I don't care if you have the greatest work rate in the world, if you're the best in-ring worker, until you've promoted a show, booked a show, and done all the thankless elbow grease that begets a successful show, you don't have an appreciation for what that entails. So I think it's easy for a lot of the boys to go, F that promoter, this promoter, blah, 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 promoter, this promoter, not realizing there's a lot that goes into it that they don't realize. Like, there's just a lot. Yeah. And it takes a lot out of you. It really does. Like, I could wrestle. I'm still young enough where I'm old, but I'm not young, but I could wrestle every night. I could wrestle a young dude every night. I could wrestle a 21, 25-year-old every night, no problem. That would be easier to me than producing one Freakshow Wrestling show per month. It takes more out of me to do that than it does to wrestle every night of the week.
Very interesting take on that. So, and I don't want to jump the gun about Freakshow either. We'll get into that when we get into it. Just to finish up with your time at TNA, are there any fond memories in particular that come to you that you would care to share of your time there, or any work that you were happy doing?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I was very proud of being a part of the new church. I was before the new church, I had debuted. My debut was sort of a double debut. Me, Gangrel, and Crowbar were kind of thrown together because we were three sort of creepy dudes.
Yeah.
We were thrown together to also go against 3 Live Crew in their debut, which was Road Dogg, Conan, and R-Truth. And so those guys, all of them on my team and the other team, I was the green guy. I was the new guy. They didn't have to give me anything, and they were very generous. And then, so that was a great experience, and Crowbar was great to work with, and Gangrel is one of my best pals to this day. I get along great with all of those dudes. Road Dogg is awesome. They're all awesome. Every one of them is awesome. And then fast forward into getting into the new church. Again, Jim Mitchell, Wolfie D / Shane Douglas. They didn't know me anything. I was a new guy, the new kid, the green kid. And they took me under their wing, and they taught me a lot. And I'm buddies with all of them to this day. And I care about them very much. And I was thoroughly proud of my work as Sinn of the new church. I wish we had a longer run, and I still have people to this day, like on shows across the land. The 2 biggest questions that I get are, is the new church ever going to ever do anything ever again? And what's Vince McMahon really like? Those are the 2 questions that over the years, those are the 2 most accumulative questions.
It's amazing that that's up there with that. I know that must be a common question, the Vince McMahon one, but so that work really stuck with people. It definitely stuck with me. I loved your time in TNA. It was really good.
So think about that. There's guys that have, a run at a company for 6 months or a year, and then 5 years later or a year later, you don't even remember that person. People can, like my work, not like my work. It's subjective art. So it's, as a thick-skinned performer, I get it. And so every fan that likes me or hates me or anything in between, please know that myself, and I will try to speak for all of the wrestlers, all the decent ones, decent-hearted ones, like we try. We bust our asses, and sometimes we're doing stuff we want to do and it works. Sometimes we do stuff that we try and it doesn't work. And sometimes we're doing stuff that we have to do, that we're told to do, and it works where it doesn't work. So sometimes it's happenstance, and we don't choose a lot of things sometimes. And so everything good, bad, or indifferent that you've ever seen me do, some I chose, some I didn't choose, but I'm a big boy and I'll make my bed and sleep in it. But I was very proud of all of the new church stuff that we did, very much so.
Right. And Duke, since you are the path into the Carver's head that we have here, I'd love to know if you resonate with that at all, what Sinn just said. Has the Carver ever felt any type of remorse or regret for what he's done and but still gone through with it?
No, he views remorse and regret as wasted time and energy, and it's a wasted emotion. He did what he did because that's what he felt in that moment, and he'll never go back and think about it and think that maybe he did something wrong. He's not like you and I. We don't have these social norms to where we think back on things. He's one direction, and it's forward. If it's in the path for him, it's not going to be for very long. He very much overcomes all kinds of hurdles. He's made it this far, and he's done some unspeakable crimes, some that I'm probably not even aware of. But to say that it keeps him up at night, or maybe it haunts him if it's any kind of ghost, no, I can say that safely.
Very interesting. Sinn, a bit after TNA is when you break into WWE as Kizarny, right? I want to dig a little bit into that experience, if you don't mind, of course, because it was, some may say at least, it was short-lived, right? And I'd love to know why. First, were you actively working to get towards WWE?
Yeah, I was hired by WWE out of OVW in Louisville, Al Snow's promotion. At the time, it was Al and Danny Davis's promotion. Mike Bucci, Nova, Simon Dean, he was the one that hired me. That day, I walked into the Davis Arena, OVW Arena in Louisville, and everybody was giggling. Robert Gibson was giggling. Al Snow was giggling. Danny Davis was giggling. Everybody was giggling. I'm like, the F is everybody giggling about? And they all knew, and I didn't know. And then Nova called me and dropped it on me, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. Like it was like a happy bomb. It was awesome. And so yeah, it was awesome. And again, just kind of going back to that whole like, some guys were there for a year or two or this or that, and then you don't even remember them. I basically had a match and a half on SmackDown. I had a match against MVP. I was in a Money in the Bank qualifying battle royal.
Right.
But I wrestled a ton of like live events for WWE where I wrestled MVP, Chavo, Ryan Braddock, Jay Bradley, Kurt Hawkins, you name it, whoever. I did a ton of those, and I wasn't the opening match. I was always stuffed somewhere in the middle, and I'm on a card full of Triple H, Big Show, Undertaker, Edge and Christian, all these dudes. And then there's little old me, who's basically this indie dude that nobody knows. So we always get a pretty damn good response, and especially on a card like that. Like, good luck getting over on a card full of those names.
Seriously.
I just took that as an awesome challenge. And I'm like, I belong here. I deserve it here. I love this as much as any of these guys do.
Yeah.
When I get in that ring belongs to me. And that's how I would look at it. So, people can heel on Kizarny or like Kizarny. I've had people do both. I have to have thick skin, and for the people who don't like it, okay. For people who did like it, like I chose to look like that, but the name and speaking the Carney was Vince's idea. He's the boss. He's signing the checks. Yes, sir. I'll do whatever I can as best as I can do for you. Right. And so people want to hate on it, people want to love it, or anything in between. That's totally their opinions, and they're welcome to it. Mm-hmm. We are the performers. We are there to entertain them. So you all take from it what you will. But in me having basically that one match on TV, if people still remember that to this day, they can hate it or love it. I must have done something for them to remember it, as opposed to that guy that was there for 6 months or a year or 2 years. They don't even remember. So I will kind of take that as a compliment.
Well, speaking firsthand as somebody who watched Kizarny debut, the vignettes leading up to it, you definitely left your mark. And I think it speaks to it, your character work, that everywhere you did go, however long you were there, your mark is remembered. People still talk about it, right? So I'd say that. So.
I'm gonna tell you a quick little story, if that's all right.
Yeah, of course.
I've talked to you very much candid, out of the clown paint, where Carver is over there in his creepy, icky mask and Dookie Cornell is there in his ominous eye patch and sitting there looking, as tough as only Duke Cornell can look. Instead of me talking kind of candid out of clown, I would like to tell you a little bit of the story before, I was a shy little kid in the farmhouse growing up and stuff. And I think this sort of on a subconscious level plays to my drive and my lack of ever giving up. I hear guys squawk, but I'm a year in, I'm not getting to push, I'm not doing this. I'm going on 22 years in. I am just as passionate, if not more passionate now than I was on my first day. Probably in better shape now too, weirdly. Like I'm going that same route as Al Snow, where he's in better shape after, in the twilight of his career. Yeah. But when my mom was pregnant with me, okay, and this is a true story. This is not a lie told by a heel to get himself heat or get himself over or anything like that. This is a legitimate story. And I think this consciously plays to my drive. Okay. My complacency to not give up my drive, no matter how great or how shitty things are. When my mom was pregnant with me, there was an influx of newborns. And the hospital in Toronto was flooded with newborn babies. The maternity ward was over capacity. So in sort of a dire makeshift last minute arrangement, they set up, I'll say it was a broom closet, but it was like a hospital broom closet where it's like pretty much a walk-in closet, but there's no windows. They took out all the cleaning supplies and they turned it into a one room, one baby maternity ward because they needed room for this baby. And I'll tell you why. And that baby was me. Mm-hmm. When my mom was giving birth, they gave her epidural incorrectly and it really damaged her spine. And my mom is straight edge, but they gave her morphine and everything to help sort of sedate her, relax her, take her out of pain. And it made her delusional. This is completely a true story. Okay. And she was screaming, thinking that the doctors had murdered me because they weren't giving me to her because they thought she was too dangerous to hold me in this manic state. So they simply took me and stuck me in this glorified broom closet of a maternity room. No windows, no anything, nobody to hold me, nothing like that. Just nurses came in every, hour or two or whatever to feed me, check on me. And my mom said that she could hear me cry for the first 3 days because I was room adjacent. And after, I guess, the first 2 or 3 days, I just stopped crying. And she figures that it was because she just figured that I figured very quickly that whether I made any noise or not, people were coming. I was alone. So it was 2 weeks before my mom was allowed to hold me. So I spent the very first 2 weeks of my life in a windowless, basically a broom closet with no affection, no anything except just a nurse feeding me, changing me, what have you. Nobody's singing to me. Nobody's doing whatever because there's all these other babies with this influx of babies. And so there you have it. I grew up my first 2 weeks on this planet alone in a windowless room. No affection. So I think in all seriousness, and this is not a wrestling promo, this is a true story. I very much, when I am surrounded by people that I love, I still feel alone. When I'm in front of a wrestling crowd is the only time that I feel a semblance of connection. And right. So, I love my wife, I love my stepdaughter, I love my animals, I love my parents, I love my handful of brothers that are, wrestling brothers. But as much as I love them all, I still, in many moments, like not all every moment, but for a lot of moments throughout every day, I feel alone. And I think that is because that's who I was introduced to this planet. So I think I will put that story up against anything that's going on upside Carver's hamster in his wheel. I'll put my story up against anybody's any day of the week. And the long story short is I haven't stopped in 22 years and I'm not going to stop until the wheels fall off. So when you are in the ring with me and you are begging me to grab onto a hold because you are going to puke or whatever, you're working up to me. I am not working down to you. So you will finish the game or I will finish the game for you. And that is how I look at it. I try to settle it by giggling and putting on the crazy costumes, because if I'm not giggling, it's going to get pretty gnarly pretty quick. So that's how I look at life.
Wow. To get a glimpse inside what's going on in there and what that drive is made up of is really, really incredible.
Nobody wants to take a stroll. Nobody wants to take a stroll up in this bean. Trust me. I've had guys like Jake the Snake Roberts.
I know you have. Yeah.
I don't want to walk through your skull. I've literally had the WWE Hall of Famer, AEW superstar, Jake the Snake Roberts, master of psychology, say to me, I do not want to take a stroll through your brain ever.
Somebody like Jake with such capturing promos, just like his in-ring psychology, but with those promos that he had, all the backstage work.
I have footage. I've never released it. I have footage, and I should probably I've got footage of Jake literally talking about saying that, that we're brothers and everything like that, but which is amazing. But the compliment that I got was, Sinn Bodhi is possibly the most creative person I've ever met. When that comes out from the mustache of Jake the Snake Roberts, I'll take that as a compliment of all compliments. To me, that's better than winning any world title or getting any certain accolade. When my best friend, my idol, my trainer, gives me that compliment, that's as good as it gets.
Absolutely. And Duke, I'd love to hand it over to you. We've heard what drives Sinn. What does drive the Carver?
Instinct, simply. He's been a creature that's just gone forward. He doesn't know a left or a right. It's always been forward. His successes, it's really hard to explain as far as it comes to the Carver. He's not a man that likes to hang his hat on any kind of accolades or has any real goals. He just knows he has to get to the next day. He knows he has to push through, and he has this lust for hurting people. So if there's any accolade, it would be that he hurt someone that day. It would be that someone isn't the same. Maybe that someone doesn't get to go to the same tomorrow that he does too. When it comes to him, brother, it's really difficult to describe you on this one. Mm-hmm. You're a truck that doesn't have any other's gear other than forward. Right. You push.
Yeah, and I don't know who would actually, much like Sinn, want to take a stroll right through that. But I'd like to talk about something that both of you could probably resonate with, and that is, how hard is it to separate what you, let's say the Carver inside the ring and out of the ring, and Sinn yourself too. I've heard you say before that you are one with Sinn Bodhi. You are one with what the crowd sees. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. There's different mindsets from different wrestlers that I am very near and dear to.
Yes.
With the Snake, Edge, they're my two polar opposite examples. Edge is very adamant that he is Adam Copeland, and he plays a character, Edge. When he puts on that trench coat and those sunglasses, he is Edge. Otherwise, He is Adam. He introduces himself as Adam. He conducts himself as Adam. He plays Edge. Jake the Snake is Jake the Snake.
Yeah.
You get a glimpse when nobody else is around, when just Jake and I are, sitting on a couch watching football or something like that, or having some oysters or something, when nobody else is around. I get those glimpses of Aurelian Smith. But 99.99% he is Jake the Snake. Me, I'm somewhere in between Edge and Jake. Like Nick and Sinn are one and the same. It's the Rob Zombie, it's the Pee Wee Herman thing where it's not so much a character. It's just this is the more flamboyant version of you, the you with the volume cranked. So me, I am a legit martial arts tournament fighter. I'm a legit former bouncer, bodyguard. I've been in more bar fights than I could count. Half of those were probably with Edge, side by side.
Yeah.
I've seen and done some pretty gnarly things in real life. Nick. Sinn is just Nick with clown paint on, but Nick or Sinn, or however you want to look at it, is,
Mhm.
I don't need clown paint to beat the shit out of you. I'm fully capable. I choose not to. I think Carver and I are different in that sense where I really don't want to hurt a fly. I'm just super capable because I grew up scared. I put down scared. I will not ever be scared. So I had to make sure that I was prepared to back up my force field.
Right.
You know, so I don't want to hurt anybody, but it's almost like, you know, I don't think a mother wants to hurt a creature that is getting in between her and a cub, you know, but instinct kicks in, and
Instinct,
you don't get in between a mother and a cub. So it's the same kind of thing. Don't get between a man and his dreams. I don't want to hurt you, but if it comes to you or my dreams, guess who's getting the bad end of this knuckle sandwich? Do not want to hurt you, but I don't have any problems fighting to get that winner share of the purse that puts food on my family's table and so forth.
Right.
I could wave a magic wand and give everybody $1 million and give myself $1 million, and then I could wrestle Carver for free, and we could entertain people by beating the crap out of each other. I would love that. But since that is not our situation, don't want to hurt him, but if it means hurting him to get that payday to feed my family, I got no problems with that.
And Duke, do you have anything to say back to that in terms of whether responding directly to Sinn or who the Carver is underneath the skin, the face mask, right? Is he one and the same person?
Carver is Carver, whether it's under his own skin or some skin that he's collected that he decided to put on his face. This is where him and Sinn are very different. He's not a man that doesn't want to, but is capable when it comes to violence. He just wants violence.
Mm-hmm.
He's not anything that's really contained. That's, like I've said, I've had to aim him in certain directions. I've had to keep him out of trouble. There's been glimpses of humanity, I would say, where maybe he can appreciate the sun for a few more seconds before there's a lot more pain back in his heart, back in his head, and then back to more violence. But him and Sinn are very opposite aspects of everything. It's very night and day between the two.
Right.
I can speak safely on behalf of Carver that he would love to go out there and maybe not wrestle you, but maybe fight you. Sinn, he would love to go out and take a trophy. Maybe he doesn't think you deserve both of your ears, or that all of your teeth belong in your head, or maybe your skin would look better on him.
If Carver or anybody else would like to dance with me in a wrestling ring, or in a pit, or in an alley, or on the moon, or anywhere else, I'm happy to do it. Especially if there's a payday involved, which means I get to feed my family after I knock the shit out of whoever is stupid enough to get in my face. Or ring it. Careful what you wish for.
Now, I'd love to get into Freakshow Wrestling a little bit. As you said, you've gotten praise from Jake the Snake, but also Roddy Piper and Dusty Rhodes are some other great legends you've gotten praise for Freakshow Wrestling. Can you talk a little bit about what led you to create such a spectacle? The what do you call it? The funnest fun, violently violent, right? Spectacle. What led you to create that?
So when I got my release from WWE, I was just frustrated, and I just wanted to, creatively unleash what I had behind my floodgates. And that's when originally the precursor to Freakshow was Dynamite Death Monkeys, where I was with a couple other guys that were former developmental guys. And we all did like a sideshow. Like I've always done sideshow and circus stuff kind of in parallel with pro wrestling. And legitimately do all that stuff as well. Again, I'm not just a character. I'm a legitimate.
Right, that's you. Yes.
Strongman, all that stuff. And so we did that, and then eventually that morphed into Freakshow Wrestling. It was just an outlet to vent. It was an outlet to it was something that I would consider a farce. It was on purpose a lot of things that I did not like about pro wrestling or about life. It was just so I would make fun of life, and like I love pro wrestling, but there's certain elements of pro wrestling I think are silly or this or that, or just not my cup of tea or whatever, which is fine. Everybody, whoever else likes it's great, no problem. But I would just make light of silly little certain things, and then kind of smash a variety show on top of that, where there was magic and burlesque and sideshow, music, and just all sorts of crazy stuff, comedy and all sorts of crazy stuff. And it was just basically into this kind of buffet of fun and violence. And it was just an outlet for me to, whatever was in my brain, I could unleash that.
That's fantastic. Can you mention some? We have clearly the Carver and Duke here are some people who, I don't know, your opinion would fit into Freakshow or not, but who can you think of maybe who you've been with in Freakshow Wrestling who maybe you could compare? I'm sure there are some people who've come through those doors who somewhat resonate with what's on the show now.
Sure. So yeah, I think Duke, Cornell, and Carver would definitely be the stuff of Freakshow Wrestling for sure. I've had a lot of so anytime I ever had famous wrestlers on the show, I would put them in some sort of absurd situation where, you know, you wouldn't get to see, you know, I would put them in a situation where you wouldn't see them like that on any other show. Like again, Gangrel is a nice, silly, playful guy in real life, but he's very scary and ominous in the ring. So if you book Gangrel, you're going to get an ominous, scary match, serious match. So I would kindergarten cop him and put him in the most ridiculous situations, like he would wrestle in a barefoot landmine mousetraps match, you know, with a Zach Galifianakis impersonator, and he'd fight the baby and stuff like that. Or I'd have John Morrison dress up as Jesus and he'd fight Santa Claus. Stuff like I put Chavo Guerrero in a match against the Invisible Man. Just silly stuff like that. I put Jake the Snake in a DDP yoga match against a 400-pound clown. Just some ridiculous things. And then some stuff could get pretty gnarly. And I think I have a lot of that footage edited and in the can that I never released because I just think, you know, it was funny 3, 4, 5, 10 years ago. I think just the landscape of humanity these days, just the humor, it just doesn't fit now. And if I had somebody editing stuff before, I would have just put it out then. And I just was always trying to wear as many hats as possible, and editor's hat was just not in the cards at that point.
Right.
And now that I can do editing is sort of like a fun thing for me. It's like doodling on my doodle pad when I was a little kid in that farmhouse. Like it's just sort of my digital modern day futuristic Jetsons doodle pad. I wish I had that during Freakshow Wrestling because I would have put out this stuff organically. And again, too, by today's day and age, it might come back to bite me in the ass. So maybe it's good to just keep it in the vault.
Yeah, I like that. I like that though, in the vault. You know what I mean? Like it's something special to you, and you know about it, and the people who were involved know about it too. But that's great. You have the Freakshow Wrestling vault. That's really cool.
And so, like back in the day, like when I was growing up, there was a thing called Jim Rose Circus, which was a very raunchy, gnarly sideshow, avant-garde thing. That Jim Rose was one of the guys that helped kind of break like Marilyn Manson and stuff like that. I worked for Jim Rose, who's basically the Vince McMahon of sideshow. And I mean, there's so many and again, Jim Rose is such a, maybe by today's standards, an obscure reference. But when I was growing up, he was one of the craziest sort of infamous live acts out there. So I think with freak shows, like if you got to see Freakshow, you really enjoyed Freakshow. And if you've heard about it or see little clips or little, you know, phone handheld clips or whatever, holy crap, what is this? So I think it sort of lives in infamy in that, like you said, in that vault.
Yeah.
Maybe, you know, I'm sure someday I will put it out, you know, when the landscape is more accommodating to outrageous ideas. But I think just right now, and no offense to the landscape, but the landscape is, to me, quite rigid and sensitive. And I think I hope that can't sustain for very long because, I mean, there's just no fun in that. Like being scared to say the wrong thing because you don't say the exact right sentence that some group of people want you to say. And then all of a sudden you're evil or you're this or you're that. And I think this landscape is very difficult for anybody, entertainers or otherwise, just to exercise a free thought without getting completely, you know, burned at the stake for it. So
yeah,
I'm glad that everybody that does get so sensitive and up in arms, I'm glad that all they can really do is just make a strongly worded meme as opposed to throw you on the cold. you know.
Yeah.
But
No, that's a really interesting take, and I don't think it's it's the popular take. I agree with you in today's society right now, but I could see that changing.
people just lighten up a little bit and realize, hey, some stuff is mean, but some stuff is also just silly or sarcastic or facetious or not meant in ill spirits. Just,
Right.
like, I mean, you're never will please all the people all the time, as that old adage goes. But
Right.
at the same time, still, like, just lighten up and live a little, just relax a little bit, realize what is,
Yeah.
heavy and what is not so heavy.
Right. And and two more questions for you. One I'm going to hand over to Carver, but I just want to know, because when I was going through Freakshow's website, one match, like, and I'm sure there are tons that would do this, but one made me, say, I was like, what? Like, what is this as a wrestling fan? What is the invisible steel cage match? Can you please explain that?
Sure. So it's basically, it's a cage match.
Right.
You just can't see the cage.
So that's the whole. Is it like a mime match? That's what came to my mind first.
No, but we have had those too. We had some mime on mime violence, which is pretty sweet. Really hilarious, to be honest.
Yeah.
The invisible cage match, I did it originally in Las Vegas with a character that I wrote called Gorgeous Gary Galaxy.
Okay.
The original guy that did it was Gary Wildman Williams, who was like a career babyface. He came up wrestling with like Edge and Christian and Joe Legend and Johnny Swinger and guys back in the day.
Right.
Career babyface, never worked heel a single night in his life. And one night he was in town when we were doing a Freakshow Wrestling, kind of the night before Cauliflower Alley. He's just like, yeah, brother, I want to do anything. Just have some fun on your crazy, weird show. I go, you want to wrestle as this Gary Galaxy? And I kind of wrote the character to be a sort of a space age villain version of him, because I knew he'd never been a villain.
Right.
And he was kind of tripped out. He's like, man, I could wrestle inside out as a babyface, but as the bad guy, he goes, I don't know. I'm like, well, you're such a great good guy. Just think of what you need from your bad guy when you're, and then just kind of flip-sided. He goes, holy crap, okay. And he went out and had a time of his life, and we wrestled in an invisible cage match. So we basically just, if there was a metal chain, block it, and or we rake each other's heads off it, or we whip reverse and block it, and
right,
head into it. We just do everything as if it was a proper cage match. There just was no foreseeable.
Of course, yeah. At least for the common eye, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so like we'd open up the door, we'd get into the door, we'd go out the door, we'd go to climb up to the top rope, we'd climb up the, get on top, like trying to get over top of the cage.
Yeah.
And then pull down, and just everything that you could do in a cage match, we did. There was just no foreseeable cage. Then we did it, here and there. We did it once in a while. I think my favorite one was, I really enjoyed the Gary Galaxy one, Gary Williams. Just because it was the first one, and I really respect Gary a lot. But I think the funner, more acclaimed one was we did it at Hood Slam in Oakland, and it was me and one of the Guar OGs, Techno Destructo, who is a Freakshow Wrestling OG, one of the creators of Guar. And we had, like, you could hear like little special effects, like when we grab onto the chain, you could hear like the ting, the clang, 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 like. Oh,
that's so cool. Yeah.
And it was just, and people totally bought it, like, this is real.
Yeah.
And it was pretty hilarious, and it was a lot of fun to do, and everybody got into it.
And that exists in the vault somewhere, I'm assuming, right?
That's actually on YouTube somewhere. If you just type in invisible cage match, it should pop up Synbody versus Techno Destructo.
Nice. I'm definitely gonna have to give that a watch.
I'm sure it's on there. If you go to, I think I might even have it. I might have put the link also on my YouTube channel, which is Freakshow Wrestling. So if you just type in Freakshow, one word, wrestling, and just scroll pretty low down on the thing, because it's pretty old now. But I'm pretty sure it's there. The crowd is part of is the coolest part about it. Like listening to the crowd.
Those chants, absolutely. No, I can only imagine that you probably get some really creative audience members, more almost as much or more than a talent sometimes, right? Because they're sitting there, they got to come up with different chants. It can't be the same old stuff. So that's pretty cool.
One of the ones that was very much like what you're talking about is the anti-gravity match. So I ironically with Techno Destructo, we filmed a closed set anti-gravity match where we tilt the camera. And so I'd grab onto the, you know, the bottom rope and like lay on my belly on the ring. So it looks like the ring is like on its side. And so it looks like I'm dangling my feet off as the ring is like going topsy-turvy.
You're right.
We did it at a live show where the announcer sort of put over like, hey, when we start doing this, you all tip this way. So when the cameras, so basically everybody in the live show is in on the gag. And then so when people would see it online or whatever, you know, as the cameras would twist, then all the audience would, whoa, you know, whatever. And it was a really fun kind of crowd participation match. Really brought people into the match, and they really got into it, and that was a lot of fun. And again, that is also in the vault. But the one from the Invisible Cage match from Oakland is on Freakshow Wrestling's channel.
Okay.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Duke, question for you about the Carver. Last question. Where does the Carver see himself heading in the future?
The short answer would be to the next victim's house.
Yeah, absolutely.
As far as career-wise, I'm not sure that he quite grasped the concept of what a career is. He understands what this is. He understands what wrestling is. He grasps that there's a forward motion with it. As far as any kind of achievement, where to go, where to be, it's just wherever forward takes him. If it takes him to the next promotions that are the next steps, the big stepping stones, yes, he'll be there. If it takes him just to the next person's house so he can wear their expensive skin, Sinn, I would hope he's not your neighbor.
Well, then everyone will definitely keep their eyes open and their doors locked. Sinn, any final advice for the Carver heading forward? What kind of advice do you have to give him, if any, wise words?
Well, I would say follow your dreams. Don't let any naysayers distract you. And if you can get this skin off this face, you are welcome to wear it, my friend. But that will not be an easy task. That's
great. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate it. Duke, Carver, Sinn, this was really great. And that'll wrap us up. Thank you very much.
Message Daddy, Boogie Woogie Man feel good. I tell my people, my brothers and sisters, don't you dare miss online, rewind, recap, relive. Oh yeah.